All right, we are live. We are here. It is the Meat of the Matter podcast. It's where we meet and you matter. We have to forgive Tony today because Peter's not here and he's doing this by himself trying to get this. I'm trying to unmute Mark's mic right now, which is unreal. Why can't I do this? Oh, he's back. He's gone. But we are going to be talking about sugar addiction today. We're going to be talking about all things sugar, and we are just having a couple of things. We need to unmute you, Mark. Mark, are you muted? Because I cannot
There we go.
unmute. There you go.
I'm
So
back.
we are live. We are gonna get into some things about sugar today, and a lot of stuff just in the mainstream and in this space. We often fall back onto the we'll call it the old dogma, the old zeitgeist about carbohydrates are essential. You need to eat them. It's all about eating less and moving more, and sugar addiction and the difference and what that sort of means, because a lot of people, I'm under the impression that sugar, if you treat it like a drug, it makes a lot more sense. So we're going to get into that today. So Mark, first and foremost, this week I watched some of your videos, some of your content, and like everybody in this space are still saying you need to eat carbohydrates. You need them. And the sugar addiction aspect where people they can't stop eating. So there's so many things that tie into this. But let's just open it up and what are your thoughts when somebody says you need carbohydrates? Let's start with that.
Well, the first thing is we need to focus on what macronutrients are important. So we look at all three. There are essential amino acids, so they come from proteins. There are essential fatty acids, they come from fats. There are no essential carbohydrates. How we came to this stage is absolutely beyond me, because when we look at what's going on in the world at the moment, so many people are metabolically unhealthy, so many people are going through diabetes, all these different issues, and nobody has any idea what's going on. We're all just blaming this on being overweight, being lazy, not going to the gym, not counting our calories, not moving as much as what we should do. But when you look at the average person is taking in probably, I would say, maybe a lot of sugar on a weekly basis. And that's something that I see an awful lot of people doing. When you look at people's diets, you can clearly see what the problem is. They're going for these low fat trends. They're going for these low calorie meals. But when you go for these low calorie meals, people just don't look at the labels. And these low calorie foods could contain like a shitload of sugar. And people don't actually realize this, and they actually skip past it because they think that sugar is a food. Like, there's no issues. Sugar's a food. We can eat sugar in moderation. There's no problems. And that's what really annoys me. And what really annoys me is when it comes from the health people and the fitness people, the people that go to the gym every single day. They can go to the gym every day. The likes of Paul Saladino. Paul Saladino out there now says that you can eat honey, you can eat sugar in moderation. But people need to understand what this guy does for a living. This guy, he leads a healthy lifestyle. He goes surfing. He can train whenever he feels like. The average person that's watching this right now doesn't go through that. The average person right now has busy families. They've got busy jobs. They're probably sitting in an office all day doing absolutely no exercise. And people think that in order to get in shape, I have to do my exercise. In order to drop body fat, I need to do exercise. No, you need to look at the diet first. You need to learn about insulin. You need to learn about how valuable insulin is. So, I mean, I could talk about this all day, but that's just the bare bones of it.
When you're what you're saying, and I mean, there are so many things that we could pick apart there, because when we're talking about sugar, there, for one, is it a food? That's a really, really good question, and it's also very nuanced. And in your situation, if you're coming from, we'll say the one end of the spectrum is diabetes, the other end of the spectrum is Paul Saladino, fit as hell.
Exactly. Yeah.
Where you fit in this is so nuanced. And when you're telling an alcoholic to switch from scotch to vodka because
Yeah.
vodka's it has no relevance. So when people are, like I often say when I meet somebody or I'm helping somebody or it's a client or it's somebody, first thing I say is stop eating carbohydrates for 7 days. Stop eating them. Just stop. And they say usually something along the lines of, well, I don't know if I can. And then I ask why.
Yeah.
If it's not a problem.
And I think that's what people need to understand is that when we look at an addiction, everybody has an addiction, whether it's gambling, whether it's alcohol, whether it's going to the gym on a regular basis. Everybody has some sort of an addiction, and you don't actually realize it. Because when I look back at what I was doing, I remember years ago, I could eat nonstop. I was eating like 8 meals a day. I would have Tupperware, and I would make sure my rice, and I'd make sure my sweet potatoes and my potatoes were always in the containers. And every 2 hours I would have to eat. And I always thought to myself, why do I have to eat every 2 hours? Like, why? It got to the stage where I couldn't control it. Like, I would have a meal, and then 2 hours, and then straight after that meal, I'm thinking about my next meal straight away.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually realize that was an addiction.
Well, exactly. And that's there's a little bit of you don't understand until you feel it aspect to it, because when I went low carb, first of all, I didn't really understand anything to do with carbohydrates and sugar. I just thought, the keto diet was good for your energy and you can lose some weight. But what happened with me was the more I dove into it and the more I wanted to know why and learn about insulin, learn about what's happening right now, because you can't just explain it to people. When I usually when I take on somebody, we use a CGM and they say, well, I'm not diabetic, just like, and why would I need to monitor my glucose? And I usually explain to them that when you actually see how blood sugar works in real time, all of a sudden you start to explain insulin, blood sugar. They see how the spikes, the swings, the glucose roller coasters, all that stuff. I wish Peter was here for this because he could explain this a lot, being obviously has to monitor that stuff. But when you see that stuff happening and you can actually look at, like, when I eat this is what happened to my blood sugar. As soon as you get into the fact that, well, every time your blood sugar is elevated past, we'll say 4 grams in your blood, you're doing damage.
Exactly.
Decades of this, all of a sudden people start to go, oh, okay. And then you say, stop eating carbohydrates for 7 days. And you watch people, some people lose their minds and they have no idea why they're freaking out. I can't do this.
Exactly.
I can't. And it's like, do you understand? And it's not personal. When you treat this like a substance abuse drug, you start to get it. And everybody's obviously a little bit different, but it's amazing when people actually can't stop eating all carbohydrates. And when they feel that, and then you explain that we're going to treat this like a drug, all of a sudden people start going, people that are honest with themselves and realize and feel it, they go, whoa, this is crazy. Because who would have thought that pasta dinner that I'm trying to eat less of is actually driving all this fake signals.
Yeah.
And sort of, maybe you can go into a little bit about, we'll get into a bit of carbohydrate 101. Now, we will get into calories because we always do, but what can you explain to people, like, when they eat any carbohydrate, what sort of happens to them?
So basically, what happens the minute you eat carbohydrates, it converts into sugar into your body straight away. Straight away. Now that's going to have a like we mentioned, that's going to have a huge impact on insulin. Insulin is going to be elevated very, very highly. So it doesn't make a difference what kind of carbohydrate you're eating. Any kind of carbohydrate, whether it's complex, where it's simple, they all are responsible for the exact same thing. They all break down into sugar. And we're also seeing the exact same thing now with vegetables. Vegetables are also having the same impact. Also, they may not be having a huge impact, but they're definitely having the same impact. But this is the nuance when it comes to carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are the only macronutrient that are going to have a huge impact on insulin. When we look at the other two macronutrients, yes, they might have a slight impact on insulin, especially protein and fats, but they're not going to have anywhere near the impact of what carbohydrates are going to have. And when we look at, if you look at a graph, like just look at a simple graph. If anybody's watching right now, I would ask you just look at like a carbohydrate graph with proteins and fats. You will see for yourself that when carbohydrates are massively elevated, this is when we get this trend. We get this trend of like spiking insulin, crashing, spiking, crashing, spiking, crashing. And this is where people notice with their hunger. And when we look at people that go on a diet, the one thing that people always struggle with when they go on a diet is hunger. They can't maintain it. They're like, okay, oh my God, like I'm after eating a bit of food, but I'm constantly thinking about something else. I can't switch off that hunger hormone. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Is there something wrong with me? And then we have these clowns out there saying that, listen, no, there's nothing wrong with you. You just need to be more disciplined.
And you know what? That is actually when you like, you know, for instance, when you go on a diet and somebody gives you a diet plan, and we'll just say maybe a dietitian, hospital. You need to watch what you eat healthy and exercise. The dietitian says, okay, this is what you eat. Here you go. Then you follow it to a T.
Exactly. Yeah.
You do the exact thing that they're saying. And as the first day, you think, well, maybe I can get through this. This is okay. By day 2, by day 3, you're starting to feel like crap. You're wondering why you're nothing's happening because you're following their directions to a T. You're following their macronutrients. You're saying, okay, I'm eating that. We'll just say for caloric value, 40% carbohydrates. They're complex carbohydrates. It's healthy whole grain. It's oatmeal. What is going on? Why is nothing happening? And why do I continue to never improve? Right? And coming from the physiological, coming from your brain's aspect, your brain is, yes, it's going to use energy. Yes, it uses 25% of your caloric value of the energy in your body. But when it's hooked on a drug and your brain really, really likes what it's getting, and then all of a sudden the dopamine, the neurotransmitters are all messed up, and all it's doing is saying, I want more of that. You misplace that for hunger. That is not hunger.
Exactly.
That is your brain on drugs wanting a fix. And I apologize, everybody, for relating it like that. But really, that's what's happening in your body. And it's not personal.
And we have to understand there's a big difference between hunger and a craving. Massive difference. So I'll give you a perfect example. If you're on a desert island and you haven't eaten food in like 5 days, you will know what hunger is. Trust me, you will know exactly what hunger is. Yeah. But because we live in a world now where we have so much temptation, especially when it comes to carbohydrates and sugars, we don't actually know what true hunger actually is now. We just fall for these cravings. So this is the reason why we just cannot stop eating. I mean, I remember when I used to go out to a restaurant and I used to go out for a meal. And I remember I used to be stuffed. I wouldn't be able to eat anymore. I'm completely stuffed. But then all of a sudden, the waitress comes out with a dessert menu. All of a sudden, you're tempted straight away. You're just tempted. That's sending a signal to your brain to say, you know what? Okay, I'm a bit confused here. Are you hungry, or is it just a massive craving? Is it just a massive addiction that you actually have? And honestly, I could have ate like 2 desserts easily, even though I wasn't even hungry. Now, how is that possible that you're not hungry, but you're still going to eat sugar?
Well, you know,
that's the sign of addiction, because that's what an alcoholic does. That's what an alcoholic does.
Yeah, that's what a drug addict does. That's what a heroin addict does. Your body physically
never stops.
And you know, if you just look at, for one, like every animal in nature, like how do they know? What do? They don't talk, but they all know what to eat. They all know how much to eat, and they all know where to go to get the nutrients they're required.
Mm-hmm.
Humans, why would we be any different? We put in place meal times, we put in place food guidelines, we put in place food pyramids, and then we actually manufacture food and tell you that you need to eat this. When
exactly,
if you look at just do the water test, and if you take water, like try and drink 5 liters of water in one go. What's gonna happen? Your natural signal will say, hey, we're gonna drown. Let's stop. Well, that's the same thing that happens when it's real food. But if it's not food and it's not meant to be consumed at that amount, and Rick, you're right. Not everyone craves sugar. This is a very it's a spectrum, which I believe, in my opinion, that they know this. So they know not everybody's going to have a problem. Then they just generalize everything and say 40 grams of carbohydrates. That's good for everyone. You know. So
yeah, but when do we get? Sorry, no, go ahead, Tony. Sorry.
No worries. But it's like these guidelines, and well, I mean, we'll get into this too. They tell us you must consume carbohydrates. You need carbohydrates. And your video just yesterday, that I mean, I did a video about this and said, like, you know what, I'm gonna swear, so earmuffs, everybody. Carbohydrates are not essential nutrients. To somebody who's addicted and physically dependent on the sugar, telling them to just eat less of it and telling them that you need to eat a little bit is wrong. And that's horrible advice.
Yeah. Now, I'm just after seeing this question below, and I just want to answer this because this is actually a good question. This is actually a good question because there's an awful lot of people out there that will actually won't understand this.
Yeah.
Yes, people can have fast metabolism. So you look at like athletes and footballers and people that play all kind of sports.
Yeah.
They can have carbohydrates if they want to. But the problem is that carbohydrate is going to run out very, very quickly. So they're going to have to restore that. They're going to have to keep on taking those carbohydrates in every couple of hours. Now, the difference is when you become fat adapted, the deeper you are into ketosis, you're going to get energy from your own body fat. And you can actually go days with having tons and tons of energy. Tons and tons of energy. There's a guy that I actually know on Instagram. I'm actually I'll actually send on to Tony after this. This guy actually fasted for 4 days. He was able to go to the gym every single day and do a workout for 4 days, and he was fasted. Okay, he was just living off his own. He was only just living off his own fat reserves. Now, the day before he did a 4-day fast, he ate an awful lot of fat. I think he ate about 400 grams of fat. He was able to go for 5 days without doing any, or without, he was running, he was doing weight training, he was living his life, he was able to work. This guy was not thinking about eating carbohydrates every 2 hours. So that's the difference. That's the big difference. And that's what I was talking about, these Paul Saladinos out there, is that yes, These people can eat these carbohydrates every 2 hours because they have fast metabolisms. But that doesn't make these people healthy. Just because you're able to burn it off does
Yeah.
not make you healthy. The average person that's watching this right now is suffering with insulin resistance, that's suffering with inflammation. And if you are suffering with these conditions, you don't just look at these athletes and say, right, okay, if these people can do it, I can do it, because that is complete and utter rubbish.
Well, and that's the thing, when you're measuring yourself against somebody else's life or their lifestyle, that's where it gets really, really tricky, because we're all not the same. And what I like to tell people is that, like, carbohydrates are okay. We don't need carbo. Let's get that straight. We don't need carbohydrates. They're not an essential nutrients. Your body can make the glucose it needs, but when we've been programmed and led for 40, 50, 60 years saying you must, where you're at when you decide to cut the carbs out, where you're at is like a knob. And of course, somebody who's burning, if you look at body fat, if you look at protein and fuel, energy, carbohydrates, I believe they could be a valuable tool to incorporate into your life. But telling
Yep.
somebody who's diabetic, insulin resistant, and obese to moderate their carbs and manage their blood sugar, that's where we get really, really complicated. And
Exactly.
everybody's got, like, when everybody's put in a category, in a box, and it's what's good for you is good for everybody, but
Yep.
they're not talking about what the macronutrients do. They're just assuming all calories are equal. You just have to look at the logic, man. Like, well, if all calories are equal, 2 bowls of sugar would be the same amount as 8 ounces of salmon. And that's just not true. And we get really, everybody treats everybody the same. And that's the thing. Like, I encourage anybody, if you're confused, if you're looking at it, first and foremost, try cutting out all carbohydrates for 7 days. Just try it. If you can't, you probably are insulin resistant and sugar addicted. It's not personal.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. And that's the difference. I was just gonna touch on that real quick as well. That when it comes to your energy, you will actually never know how much energy you can actually have when you actually become fat adapted. You should never be in a situation where you're getting these crashes where you have an energy push and then it just drops, and then you have an energy and then you have a drop. It should be consistent throughout the whole day, guys. It should be always consistent. You should have a huge amount of energy. And this is where you're going to notice the difference when you become fat adapted.
And I often think about this, like, what would we have done without all this stuff, without all the institutions, without all the guidelines, without all the blood work? What would we have done? We would probably trust our parents teaching us how to survive. And when we eat food, we would have eaten what's available. We would have been nourished, and we would not have been thinking anything is necessary except for survival. And now we're looking at these food guidelines and these food pyramids, the monocrop agriculture, the indoctrination of our medical system, them telling you you're broken, and they're telling you to eat stuff that's not natural. So everything changes when you get fat adapted, when you're able to use 2 fuel systems. One, your body's making ketones and using fat for energy. The other side, you're using quick burning sugar. But if you're way past the sugar usage, you're obese, and you're storing potential energy is through the roof. Why just wouldn't it make sense to be able to tap in to that natural process of burning potential energy for fuel? You know what I mean? Like, and that's
exactly.
And I mean, we've labeled insulin resistance, we've labeled, even sugar addiction. We had to call it something because it's a problem, but it's not natural.
Yeah.
It would have never have been natural.
Exactly.
Right. And
Exactly.
so when all these people are eating these fake foods and this garbage, that only just adds to the fire where, it's, you get caught in that loop. So maybe when we were growing up, or when we were getting older, or developing, that oatmeal isn't as bad from a metabolism side. But when you're 40, 50, 60 years old and you are so insulin resistant and so, sugar addicted from the decades of not being aware of this, all of a sudden that oatmeal is kryptonite. So it's a different concept.
Yeah.
And I mean,
and that's another thing as well, that we're all going to get older. And what you used to do when you were younger, you're not going to be able to get away with that shit anymore.
Yeah.
So whatever, when you were 18, 21 and you were eating all these foods and it didn't have any impact on your health, guys, you've got to consider the age. Things are going to change when you get older. Things are going to slow down. Your metabolism is going to slow down, and you need to understand why the metabolism is slowing down. And it's all down to, it's not because of your age. It's all because of our lazy habits when it comes to our food. We're just being completely lazy. We're focusing on the wrong type of food. That's what the problem is.
Well, we're actually focusing on not food. We're convinced that the food they're telling us is food actually isn't. And that's that's another animal. You know what I mean? It's this processed garbage. We got a Mister. Thanks for joining us today. Another thought: poor thyroid function equals poor carbohydrate metabolism, leading to metabolic disease and weight gain. Okay, this is really interesting because quite often when I talk to people about metabolic health, quite often, if you have thyroid issues, if you have some kind of hormonal imbalance, if you have all leading to insulin resistance, what I find is it's not about treating that specific thing that causes that. It's taking care of everything. So obviously thyroid function will greatly affect you because it's necessary. It's our thermometer. It's a clock. So it's got its own functions. And when anytime you eat sugar or you raise your blood sugar and crank up your insulin and become insulin resistant, it's going to affect every hormone. So the thyroid function is absolutely tied into the carbohydrate metabolism. But here's the thing: when anything's wrong with your metabolic anything, once you eliminate the sugar and the carbohydrates and get your insulin under control, that in a nutshell is reversing diabetes. The diabetes is only elevated blood glucose, and it's just a label to tell you that your body's in this state. But when you just, say for instance, you have a cut, you put a Band-Aid on it. The Band-Aid isn't healing your cut. So when you're trying to handle all these hormonal issues, first thing, it's a good idea to get your insulin down. Get your insulin under control. Then everything else can start at least getting back to the point of functioning normally. Then we can talk about nutrients. But carbohydrate metabolism.
Yeah, it's very, very simple. If your insulin is too high, you cannot burn body fat. It's that simple. It's absolutely impossible. There's been many studies on this. Ben Beekman does a very, very good research on this with people, and he makes absolutely perfect sense. When insulin is elevated too high, you're blocking the body from burning fats. It has nothing to do with the calorie model. It's all down to insulin. And how this impacts our hormones.
Yeah.
So when we look at these metabolic issues and thyroid issues, and we look at all these issues, yes, they're hormonal, but you need to understand why you were actually gaining weight in the first place. You need to understand what's causing the most damage. You need to understand, like we mentioned at the very, very beginning, why are you overeating? Why can you not stop eating? And it's all down to your hormones. And this is where we need to focus on the insulin model and not the calorie model.
Yes, and I would be, honestly, every road leads to whatever issue, insert condition, disease, or problem here. Fix your metabolic health first. If you are insulin resistant, and it doesn't matter what causes insulin resistance, because what is elevated blood sugar is the reason why you're insulin resistant. That's, there's so many people that argue these dollars and cents, and they get nitpicky about things. But when I'm helping people, and when I say, okay, we're, you present yourself with this problem, this issue, this thing, we take care of everything. And it starts with not chronically elevated blood sugar, getting that insulin down. Then these hormonal issues, Hashimoto's, estrogen problems, all seem to just on their own, and it may take a little time, but they tend to resolve. And I'm seeing women with like hardcore PMS, symptomatic PMS, hardcore PCOS, obviously endometriosis, get back to balance by taking care of their metabolic health first. And most people don't realize that your sugar addiction, your chronically elevated blood sugar, your constant consumption of carbohydrates now at this point in your life is leading you down a bad path. And if you don't realize that it's all part of it. And, we're so far removed from, the videos that you had this week, Mark, with this guy is holding a box of cereal and he's saying, you need this. Everybody needs carbohydrates. Yeah. You got to eat this. Well, that is just, I was shaking my head when I was watching that, just going like, are you kidding me? How can you tell somebody that is seriously like food noise, food addiction, can't stop eating, binging, that just to eat less of the stuff they're binging on? That is
right? Yeah, and we need to touch on this subject, because this is a massive subject that's going on in the world at the moment, and that's food noise. Food noise is a big issue at the moment, and how people are struggling with food noise because they don't understand why they're struggling with it in the first place. And this is the reason why now we have this craze with Ozempic, because it's shutting off the hunger hormone. But I just find this incredible that people are taking this Ozempic, but they're still able to eat sugar. They're still able to eat carbohydrates. I just find it incredible. And then when I see these people saying that, well, this is a medical problem, I couldn't stop eating. I struggle with food noise. I needed to get something to stop my eating habits. No, you just need to stop fucking taking the carbohydrates. That's actually having a massive insulin. That's what you need to stop doing. It's not rocket science. It really is not rocket science. We do not need carbohydrates. I know we're going to keep on mentioning this over and over and over again, but like, first of all, they're not essential. And like Tony mentioned a few times, your body produces all the glucose your body needs. You can also get glucose from gluconeogenesis, from eating protein. There's so many ways of producing glucose in your body. Your body doesn't need to get it from your diet. It's as simple as that. I don't care what anybody else says. When it comes to carbohydrates, there's not one carbohydrate out there, whether it's oats, whether it's sweet potato, whether it's rice, there is no essential carbohydrate. There is no benefits at all when it comes to carbohydrates. And when we look at what's going on in the world at the moment, as I said from the very beginning, so many people are suffering with their health. We can't just keep on going back to our doctors and saying, right, okay, what medication am I going to take? What supplements am I going to take? Guys, you need to start addressing the root cause of your problem, and you need to start focusing more on your diet, and you need to stop listening to these people on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok when they're saying that you can eat a box of cereal, because in my opinion, a box of cereal is a box of shit. That's what
yeah, well, and it comes down to this: when you read ingredients, if cereal was so good for you, why is there 17,851 ingredients in there? You know what I mean?
But not only that, if sugar wasn't bad for you, then why is it in every single one of our foods?
Yeah, and Mark, tell us how many names for sugar there are in processed food. You told me this the other day, and I
There's
was like,
seven. There's 75 hidden sugars in our food. 75.
so basically, there is 75 ways of putting sugar in your packaged food
Yeah,
by and not saying sugars on the nutrition facts. So there is no added
exactly.
sugars, but yet they have, and we're not going to go that far to name them all. But you know what? If you can't pronounce the word or you don't know what it is, don't eat it.
Yeah,
Pretty
yeah,
simple, right? Like
exactly.
that's the thing. And
And you know what the scary thing was, Tony? I was in your country. I was in America a few weeks ago, and I picked up a box of cereal, and on the ingredient it said trisodium phosphate. Have you ever heard of that?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now I had to Google this shit. I hadn't got a clue what this was.
That's
When
the
I
right.
Googled, yeah, when I Googled this, I could not believe where this comes from. Couldn't believe it.
Where's it come from?
And I was like, people are actually in taking this, and this is actually harmful if you swallow it. But people are taking this stuff every single day.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's, you know what? That's a great thing there, Mark, because if if you read said ingredient here and you have no idea, for one, you can't pronounce it. For two, Google it. When you Google it, you're going to see, once you start realizing that this stuff is not food, it is poison, or it's some kind of thing that they deem safe. And we've talked about this a little bit before, but the FDA in the United States of America have something called the GRAS list, GRAS, generally recognized as safe. What the hell does that even mean? Think about it. Just think
Exactly.
about it. This is on the we think it's safe list, but as long as you don't eat too much, we found that it's not killing you. That
Yeah.
that that means immediately. So it's not going to kill you immediately. But if we put this much in, and then they'll put in 75 whatever other forms of sugar, seed oils, processed food, and now you can't stop eating it. And you're
Yeah.
saying that you need drugs to curb less of that. So
Yeah.
it's unbelievable how, like, if you just start thinking from a first principles, from a natural standpoint, like real food. We don't have these
And we
issues.
need and we need to dig deeper into the research, because when people come out with these ridiculous claims about diabetes and red meat and heart disease and red meat, people don't understand when they did these research and they did these studies, they forget to understand what other foods they were having these foods with. So when you were having this burger, did you have it with a bun? Did you
Yes.
have it with bread? Did you have it with chips? Did you have it with alcohol? Nobody on the internet tells you this. Nobody.
Yeah. And and that I just actually one of my clients, she, bless her heart, she's 62, and she just sent on my group, she just sent out a Harvard study thing that was on on the news in the States. And it was, well, just as we thought, is that meat you're eating killing you? First of all, that was it. Then after that headline, they went into hot dogs, hamburgers, and processed meat. Okay, sure. What are they eating it with? Every hot
Exactly.
dog, every hot dog has a bun, you
Yeah.
know? So it's unbelievable how, once you start to see the game, once you start to see the tricks, once you start to realize the the stuff that's driving us to lifestyle broken health, they're telling us, leads us to the medications, lead us to the Ozempic. Don't worry about it. You just keep doing what you're doing. You're broken. Here's a drug. We'll fix you. And now all
Yeah.
of a sudden, holy shit. And then, potential gastroparesis and all the stuff that comes along with it they don't talk about. Ozempic face. And it's like, what are we doing, man? And I love how you always go back to that. And the sugar addiction thing is tied to the Ozempic, because if you can realize that you're addicted to sugar, if you're a sugar addict, which most of us are. That is their go-to. Just
Well,
look at it.
did you,
That's,
did you see the video I put up yesterday about Ozempic in the United Kingdom?
I possibly, but
Well, they were talking about Ozempic, and they were saying that they're giving out 400 pens a week on Ozempic, and the waiting list is insane. And I looked in the comments on this page. There was over 2,500 comments on this page, and every one of them were prepared to pay £150 a month on these injections.
oh, I'm gonna take a minute to
150.
process that.
Now, when you multiply that by 12, or you do that for the rest of your life, that is a lot of money. That is a lot of.
And do you know, like, everybody that's sort of like gonna hear this and sort of listening to us talk, and we may sound preachy, we may sound like, for one, both Mark and I know Peter's listening somewhere. We've all done it. We've all felt the stuff that you're thinking about when you have to look at yourself honestly and say, okay, you have it's literally two roads. One, medicated for the rest of your life and hooked on their shit. The other thing is taking responsibility for your health and understanding it doesn't have to be that way. And I'm telling you, if you want to take a drug, spend all the money that Mark just talked about, fine. But you know what? There is people out there, they don't know that they're not broken. And that's why we're doing this. Because go ahead.
And no, I was just gonna say, like, guys, I've been there. Like, I was one of these people that I was over 300 pounds. If you look at my Instagram, there's a picture of me. You'll see for yourself. I was overweight. I was 300 pounds. I'm only 5'3". I'm not the biggest person, but I was carrying a lot of weight. Now I have a fitness background, so I could easily lose the weight just being on a low calorie diet. The problem was for me, I couldn't sustain it. I could not sustain it. I was always hungry.
Yeah.
When I look back at what I did in the last 20 years, I have so many regrets.
Oh,
so
no.
I wish. Go ahead, Tony.
You know what? And it's not your fault. And you say this quite often. Like, if you're looking at this, and we'll talk about this in a minute, Lambs, because that's really good, the industry. We'll talk about that too. But when we get told we're broken or we're lazy or we're just, not worthy, we got you covered. Here, have a drug. Here, have this. Don't worry about it, man. Your high blood pressure, we don't even know what causes it because they don't admit it. It's idiopathic or essential hypertension. So what's happening, doc? Just take this blood pressure med. And we're not doctors. We're not scientists. We are not.
Because I used.
We're not.
No, because I used to be the very, very same. I was just going to say, I used to be the very same. When I was overweight, I used to always think it's my fault. It's my fault. If I want to get better, I need to go and see a coach. I need to see a dietitian. I need to see a doctor. I need to take the supplements, like all these fat burners. It's my fault. I need to stop doing what I'm doing. But I could never understand why I was doing it.
Yeah.
Nobody could tell me the reason I had an eating disorder in the first.
And you look at a lot of the doctors in the low carb, keto, carnivore space. They are not teaching you what they taught or they got taught from medical school. They are on their own. So when these people are speaking out against their college, their faculty, they're getting out of their lane. I don't know, man. That's when I start to go, why? Why would they risk their career to try and help people? And it's crazy because the industry, that's a great point there, Lambs. The industry is huge. And the industry is all connected. We often talk about the military industrial complex, especially in North America, how the machine, well, there's the pharmaceutical, big food, big ag, and now supplements industry as well. So they know what to do because they're going to tell you the wrong information, get you hooked on their monocrop big food, and don't worry about it. When you're sick, we got your medication. And it's
And the fact is, I mean, I don't care what anybody else says. You are not going to get healthy from taking something out of a bowl.
No. And that's right there what you're saying. It's like, I try and relate this to people. If you're on lifestyle medication, your lifestyle got you to that medication.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't change your lifestyle, they'll convince you that you need this medication. But that's
Mm-hmm.
where it doesn't matter what caused it. It's the lifestyle. Because what did we do before there was these miracle drugs? I
Yeah.
actually met a guy who was I was helping out with some other stuff in my clinic, and he was on 4 hypertensive medications, 4 blood pressure meds. And
Right.
I asked him, I was like, well, what's your diet like? And he's like, well, I eat healthy, of course. And he eats oatmeal with maple syrup and berries for breakfast. And I'm just like, wow, right? Like the first thing he says about his diet. And I am not judging anybody. I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do. We, in this channel, in this podcast, in this talk, especially Peter, coming from a type 1 diabetic standpoint, he has to be aware of this stuff, is
Yeah.
start asking questions. Start really, you take responsibility for your own health, because nobody's coming to save us. No doctor cares, really. And I'm sorry, but they have 10 minutes to see what's wrong with you, and then they send you on their way, usually with a prescription.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's the thing. That's the difference, man. And it's crazy how we just, once you get caught up in this machine, in the loop, if you don't start taking responsibility for your health, and usually just look to nature, natural whole food. We can argue what whole food is, but at least start there.
So,
One
so
ingredient.
let me ask you a question, Tony. Why is this so important to you to get your message across to people?
Because I see people every day, and it really, really, it hurts, because I don't think I'm anything special. I don't think I'm not, definitely not God, and I'm definitely not, I don't have to get in anybody's way. But I see the majority of people in public laboring for breath, pushing a grocery cart around in the grocery store with no food in it, thinking they're okay. And it's like, when I see the stuff that you do your videos about, and I see these doctors and these people that are preaching the same shit that got people sick. And you know what happens eventually? People give up, because they think they're so broken that they require all this shit. And all I know is how I feel. I want to tell the world. I want to help people see the light. And and this is what it's all about for me, is if I can help on YouTube, on social media, one person start taking their power back. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to watch, man. And when you know something, and I know you come, like, this is why we get along so well, Mark, because I know how you feel about it. The louder you scream, the more people that are preaching the other side scream back, and then everybody's caught in the middle, and it's disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
When you see that the advice and the guidance from people that are just, and yeah, so that's sort of a long way of telling you, like, I just want to give people hope and say it's possible to start the healing process. And it's not, it's not easy. You have to work at it. You have to start asking questions. And really, if Mark says something today, guys, and it pisses you off, or you think it's bullshit, dig into it, learn about it, call him out on it. And you know what? I dare you, because if you're honest with yourself and you actually look into this, you will see there are so many different sides, and it's so confusing. The internet is riddled with differences of opinion. And there's doctors out there, Mark, that say, hey, I'm funded by Ozempic, so sugar addiction is not real. It's just in your head. You're not addicted to sugar. Take Ozempic. That.
Of course course they're going to say this because they're getting richer from taking this stuff.
And that's the other thing that drives me crazy. I mean, and realistically, any good doctor will tell you they got 20 hours of nutrition training in medical school. All the good ones, all the good doctors will say that. The other ones, and I understand because, you know, I did it. I went to nutrition school. I was in school for 3 years. 3 years. And I was learning about this stuff. And then as I was learning the other side, I realized it was all wrong. So I could have done two things. I could have got my degree, wrote my exams, been accredited with an RHN title, and got in trouble for preaching what I do and speaking the truth, what I'm saying now. Scope of practice, whatever you want to call it, standard of care. I would have been preaching about a carnivore, and they would have, somebody in the nationally would have said, you can't do that, you're harming people. So I was like, what do? I don't want their degree. Now, doctors, I feel for them because imagine going to medical school, spending all this time, money, investing in the hope of helping people. And then imagine when you realize they're actually, what they've taught is wrong, and you see it all the time. Doctors come out of this and they're like, holy cow, I was wrong. You know, you've got Ken Berry. He's a GP. He's a family doctor. And he now said, I'm sorry. I was wrong for years. You know, like that is balls. And that is, you know, somebody who's I want to look up to is the people that speak out against this shit, because we're all put in a funnel, and it's clear when you see it. Money. That's what it comes down to. Sugar addiction is real.
Yeah. It's all driven, and like you, Tony, I just refuse to sit back now and watch people suffer. I just refuse. That's the reason why I just constantly say to myself, right, I need to keep on doing these videos every single day, because if I can reach one person, just one person, and I can change their life, then my job is done. And I just don't want to see, when I saw that video yesterday on Ozempic and so many people heard this, I was like, listen, we need to keep doing this. We need to keep spreading them, because if we don't, I can only imagine what's going to go on. We're going to be in a worse state. And when do we get to the situation where we say, no, enough is enough? I'm not buying any more medication. I'm not buying any more supplements. I'm actually going to learn how to heal myself.
And you know what? And that's a great point there, Lambs. Nobody knows what a healthy plate should look like. And here's the catch. If you have a healthy plate, you'll feel it. But that's all that needs to be said. They can tell you to eat whatever the hell they want. They can tell you to eat this much of that, or eat this, don't eat that, eat this. But you know what? If you're not feeling like a human, if you're not feeling alive every day, you have work to do. That's it. Simple. You know, it's not about perfection, and you're not gonna do this magic healing in 2 days. But on the way to, learning about how your body feels is so key. And we're all inundated by information and bullshit. And the most important aspect of this, and especially of what we do, is we're not trying to tell you to do anything. But when we're trying to show you another side and we get attacked because we get told we're wrong, that's where I'm like, you know what, man? That's the problem. We've all felt it, Mark. We talk about comments getting censored. We talk about information getting deemed misinformation. We have to watch what we say, because we can't upset them by giving them the truth. And that's in all aspects. And it starts when we started this conversation today about sugar addiction. This is a real thing. But you know what? You have dietitians, nutritionists, doctors saying it's not a real thing. Your sugar addiction is in your head. Bullshit.
And I've told this story a few times. I lost my parents-in-law last year. And I've spoken this to a few people. When I went to the doctor and said to the doctor, listen, why are you giving these people medication? Why are you feeding these people sugar every 2 hours? I was told off these people that you're not a doctor, you're not a PhD. Why would I take nutrition advice off you?
Yeah. Well,
And that really really frustrates me. That just because you work in the health sector, that you know what you're talking about. Now these people were in their 70s. They still had a long life ahead of them. They're not here anymore, and
yeah,
that hurts me. That hurts me a lot.
yeah. And it, you know, and it, this is kind of a little tie-in, but when I look back at my life and the people I've lost and why whatever happened, I, not only myself, I regret of not knowing this stuff when I was younger, but the amount of people that I could have helped if they just knew this stuff, if they just knew that they didn't have to rely on this, that they didn't have to eat. And unbelievable, man. And it's we're all in some way, shape, or form affected by this. And there's people that are gonna they're not gonna believe you. They're gonna tell you you're crazy. Mark and I both eat a lot of meat and fat. I don't think carbohydrates are necessarily, it's contextual. I don't, for the most part, eat carbohydrates. But when you're doing these, like when you're getting into this way of eating, this lifestyle, this low carb, whatever it is, it's human food. It's real food to begin with. And it will heal you. That's the difference. When you give your body the nourishment it needs, it will show. And we'll just take one more comment, Mark, and then we'll probably wind it up. Peter's gonna scream at us saying, "Hey, we want more." People are not desperate enough about their conditions. Before going carnivore, most of us were closer. Yes, that is a great little statement, Lambs, because you know what? I was there. Mark, where were you when you went carnivore? Where were you at with your health? Like, and then we'll wind it up.
I was in a really really bad way, a really really bad way. I couldn't. I've said this many times. My mental health got to the stage where I just didn't want to be here anymore. There were so many different times when I used to have a talk with myself and said, right, this world would be so much better if I wasn't here. And I didn't realize that this was having a huge impact on my mental health. And I'm so glad I didn't make that decision, because now I understand why I should be here. And I should be here because I want to make sure that I'm looking after my family, I'm looking after my health. And that's why I've made the decision that I'm never, ever going to go back and do that ever again.
Man, I feel ya. And I see so many people at rock bottom where their hope, my Fleur, my friend Fleur, a year, endometriosis. If you Google this, there is no known cause, there is no known cure, surgery and medication. The first period cycle, the female for in her adult life, last month, she didn't even notice it. First time in her life. We're talking she couldn't do things based on her body telling her I'm bleeding and painful. This is the potential. What she and she told me when we started talking, she's over it. She's thinking surgery. She's thinking like, I've given up. I'm gonna take whatever they're giving me, and I just wanna not be in pain. She hit rock bottom, and she 100% proved the system is bullshit. And that is, I urge people, don't wait till you're desperate. Don't wait till you're desperate. In Mark's situation, in Fleur's situation, I was in the same boat. I couldn't move. I was getting old. I was going to die. That's how I felt. And it all starts with just realizing, focus on food. Start there. Start with real food. And
well said.
And we are here every Sunday, 10 a.m. We want to thank all the people that have been like comments. We're going to get sort of worked out and get everything rolling as far as the production. We miss you, Peter, because, he usually drives the ship and I'm new. But, we are here, the Meat of the Matter podcast, Sundays at 10. We're going to take questions, and we appreciate all of them today. Sugar addiction is real, people. Mark, any last comments?
No, I'm just hoping you guys actually learned something from this today. And that's basically what we're trying to do. This is the reason why we came up with this decision to do this, because we just want to help as many people as possible. And we want to show people that there is a way. And if you are suffering with any kind of condition, guys, any kind of condition, before you run out and listen to the doctor's advice and take a supplement and take medication, all we're asking is address the diet first. Take a look at it. You never know. You never, ever know. Replace the carbohydrates. Take them out. Just see what happens, because it could change your life.
Yeah. And, we're not doctors. We're not scientists. We're normal people with normal shit that we had to deal with and overcome. And all we're trying to do is just share this with people. And, we're not trying to solve the world's problems. We're just trying to bring this information out and have conversations about it. We're here. We'll see you next week. Peter will be back for all you Dutchies out there. Thank you very much for being here with us today. I'm Tony. That's Mark. And for just to let you know, if you ever want help, if you need to get a little bit deeper, reach out and we'll post the links to Mark below. Of course, you can email me. My stuff will be below. Talk to Peter, and appreciate it. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.